My name is Brian Bumphus, lead recovery coach at Windmill Wellness Ranch, a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center. I believe people relapse ultimately it's kind of like a trial and error game, right? People just have to learn how to stay sober, and in that learning process, relapse is a part of it. Relapse doesn't have to be a part of your recovery journey, but it is a part of a lot of people's story. So you find out how to live sober, and then you might test the waters, and you try to figure out how to live sober again, and unfortunately, relapse is a part of that process. The number one factor that I see people relapse from is isolation. The fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous, the fellowship in Smart Recovery, the fellowship in the recovery community in general can help a person when they're feeling down, when they're feeling isolated, when there's no one to talk to, when they get bored. The isolation, sitting in the house, it really does people bad. So being lead recovery coach at Windmill Wellness Ranch, we take people through a myriad of recovery processes. They might go through the steps, they might go through smart recovery, and they heal here. The community heals each other. They're not isolated at rehab. They see therapy at rehab. They work on the recovery issues at rehab. They work on trauma. And the problem is when they go home, they isolate, they sit at home, they don't work on their recovery. That's one of the biggest leading contributors to relapse. When you go home and all the factors that got you sober, you forget all that stuff. And you go home and you do the exact same thing that led you to rehab in the first place. Like if I was isolated at home, then I come to the recovery community, I heal, and I go back home and isolate, I just lead to the same exact thing. Pain is a wonderful motivator. This is like a deadly game of trial and error. And so when someone leaves rehab, the same things that got them sober, right? The same pains and motivations that got them there, they start to forget that. Some people like to say we have a wonderful forgetter, you know? So when people start to get their life back together, they start to forget the trials and tribulations which drove them to rehab in the first place. So like when people start to get their life back, what we tend to see is that I get my job back. That starts to take away from my recovery. I get my kids back. My kids start to take a time away from my recovery. And all those things that recovery gave me as a bonus start to rob my time, and I start to put my recovery on the back burner. And when I put my recovery on the back burner, bad things happen. Slowly, I start to isolate. Slowly, I begin to put my kids and my wife in place of my recovery, and then I begin to lose them. Anxiety, social anxiety in particular, could be a big contributing factor to relapse. People who had the same social circle for years, my friends, my peers that I've grown up with, the people I feel comfortable with, I start to gravitate towards them, and I don't gravitate towards the uncomfortable situations and the new relationships that I've built in recovery. That in itself, it gets lonely, you know? So a person who, let's say they are used to going out and playing pool and doing certain activities, and all those activities are linked to drinking, you know? How do I do those activities sober? Those are things that I need to learn. That's where experience comes in. I need to experience all these new things sober. I need to do all these new things like a first sober, my first wedding sober, my first loss sober. A lot of times we see people when they lose things. I lose a relationship, I lose a job, I lose one of my identities. I start to relapse, right? I start to feel bad about myself. Negative self-talk comes into play, right? I start to isolate, and eventually, when my disease can cut me off from all the love in my life, that's when I relapse. So there's something I call the blame game, right? And man, I've seen it multiple times where everybody's a problem except for me. I can blame my wife, I can blame the job, I can blame Fox or CNN, right? I can blame all these different factors, but the one thing I never blame or look at is myself. Man, if the world and everything around it is the contributing factors to my relapse, then I'm pretty much screwed, because I can't change the world. The only thing I can change with the help of God is myself. I need to be able to change myself and see how can I adjust to these factors. I need to figure out how do I pivot and adjust to the world and problems as they come. People who use these type of excuses for a relapse, I would tell them, man, victims do not get sober. Victims will continue to get victimized, and victims will ultimately destroy themselves by their own mentality. To the person who loves an addict, a person who loves someone who uses all these excuses as to why they relapse, I would say buckle up, get ready for the ride. Living with an addict is a difficult thing. I talk to many mothers, fathers, husbands, wives. I talk to these people on a daily basis, and a lot of them try to throw money at the problem. They try to help addicts in all these different ways, but the best thing you can help an addict with is love. Do not cut them off, maybe cut their resources off as far as funding. Do not fund their drug or alcohol addiction, but keep the love there. You might want to maybe fund a detox, maybe fund a treatment center, but don't fund them as far as giving them an apartment. I've seen too many families destroy kids just giving them an apartment and trying to pay their way out of it, per se. To the loved ones, I would tell them, man, just love the addict through it. Yeah. To the person who has just relapsed, man, I would tell you, man, what victories did you have between that and the last relapse? A lot of times when people relapse, they discount the time they had before their relapse, how long the relapse was, and the time they had after that relapse. Let's say that I had drank 1 or 2 beers within a 6-month span. I would tell the person, you've never done that before in life. That's awesome. Right? That's a plus in your journey, right? Your journey is going to be filled with multiple pluses and minuses. I need you to get yourself up, dust yourself off, and let's try again. I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to coach you through this. As lead recovery coach at Windmill Wellness Ranch, that's the continuum of care that we want to be able to give people, that we don't just bring you through treatment, drop you off, and say goodbye. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at walking you through this with our alumni department. You have access to us 24/7. We're looking to teach you when you do fall down, man, we're gonna patch your knees up, man. We're gonna bring you to a meeting and see what we can do next time. Life is filled with multiple failures. If I never fail, man, I'm never gonna learn how to succeed. If failure is just a part of the process, I need you to get up and walk with me again, and I'm gonna walk with you through this journey. For anybody who's relapsed, I just wanna encourage them to prioritize recovery over anything else, right? If I can't look at recovery as a working part of my life will never be correct, right? This is a deadly game of trial and error, you know? Let's say I step into a street and I darn to get hit by a car. My mind is gonna prioritize coding so that I do not do that again, right? Let's say that I isolate and I find out that that's not good for my recovery. My mind needs to prioritize community. Right? So every time that you relapse, if you do, or if one of your loved ones relapse, let's just work with them, go through it, do a relapse autopsy, which us here at Windmill Wellness Ranch, we can teach you relapse autopsies, we can teach you tools. If you call up here and just want some advice for your loved ones, ask for Brian in the recovery coach department and I'll give you advice for free. We want to be able to just help the recovery community as a whole. We know that each addict that we help can potentially help another addict. One of the biggest tools that we have in fighting relapse is helping another addict or an alcoholic, right? When I help someone else, man, it reminds me where I've been. It also gets me out of my own thinking for a second. One of my mentors, he had told me, the way for me to get out of my own problems is to help somebody else with their problems, right? And so when I help people, man, when I engage in community, when I do things that are not of myself, for some reason, man, that makes me feel good today. I don't know how many of you out there have just helped somebody with a math problem, helped somebody with homework, been useful to someone other than yourself, and it gives you this boost, man. That connectivity, that natural connection that we get from other human beings is actual medicine for us.